Welcome to Football Letter Live. Tonight we welcome Letterman defensive tackle Aeneas Hawkins, who's now the Chief Athlete Officer at Limitless NIL. And from the Collegian Alumni Interest Group, Terrence Casey and Jeff Mosier join us. They're going to share stories about their time writing for the Collegian and covering Penn State football. Football Letter Live is member supported, and we're so grateful to have your support. If you're a Penn Stater, you belong in the Alumni Association. And if you love Penn State, you're in the right place. This is Football Letter Live. Well, welcome into Football Letter Live. As I mentioned in the open, we have a great show lined up for you tonight. We're going to talk a little NIL with Aeneas Hawkins, Letterman defensive tackle, and now the Chief Athlete Officer with Limitless NIL. The Collegian alumni are in the house. We're talking to Terrence Casey and Jeff Mosier, and our producer, Vincent Lungaro, is going to come from behind the screen to join us. But before we bring them on the show, let's welcome our co-host, John Petishnock. John, how are you tonight?
I'm doing well, Paul. Good evening. Good evening to all the Penn Staters tuning in. Have another really nice show for you tonight. We're coming off the feel-good vibes of homecoming weekend, looking to keep that going this weekend against Ohio State. But of course, before we get to that, some nice guests coming up tonight, and we're going to get their Penn State perspective on football and probably a few other things as well.
Absolutely. We look forward to talking to them. But John, great homecoming weekend. It's hard to not draw some parallels back to 2016, right? With the visit that we had up in Michigan in 2016, and then we come home and take care of business against Minnesota. We did the same here for homecoming, gave the alumni a great show, those who returned for homecoming weekend, and now we turn and we look towards the Buckeyes from Ohio State.
Yeah, and something else that you can draw a comparison for, in 2016 after Minnesota, we played Maryland next before Ohio State, and Maryland was the homecoming game. So Maryland preceded the game in 2016. Of course, in some ways 2016, it feels like a long time ago, but certainly, you don't have to look too far into our past to realize that, look, this weekend's going to be a competitive game. I feel like when two ranked teams are playing, I feel like upset shouldn't even be in the conversation. When you've got two ranked teams going up against one another, it's going to be a good battle. Ohio State actually has not played a ranked team up to this point. And so, certainly they're formidable, but, it's hard to say that, they've been truly tested before this weekend. And Michigan plays Michigan State this week, and we know that game is always wild. A few years ago, we were actually in Columbus. Those two teams were playing. Michigan was a 21-point favorite, and Michigan State won that game. So you win Saturday, and all of a sudden November becomes very, very intriguing for alumni, for fans, for the football team. And certainly it's going to be a really good game because I feel like the defensive secondary, the defense overall is a big strength. We made Minnesota one-dimensional last week.
Right.
Asked James Franklin about that in the post-game presser, and that defense is good. But when you can make your opponent one-dimensional, that adds a layer of intensity that almost nobody can deal with when you're going up against the Nittany Lion defense.
Yeah, I'm not one of these guys who follows the point spread very closely, but I happen to see that we're 15.5 point underdogs. I think that's disrespectful at home. It's not consistent with the recent history of these. We've played a lot of close games recently with Ohio State and have been in every one of those games, home, away. It doesn't matter. So I hope that provides a little bit more of a chip on the shoulder for our team as they go into the big noon kickoff. John, what's your position on kickoff times? I know I have some strong takes on it, but what do you think about a noon kickoff against Ohio State?
So in a vacuum, I love noon kickoffs. I love, like, if they would play the game at 9 a.m., that would be just fine with me. And I'm looking at that from a media perspective, waking up, working the game, working all that afterwards. So especially on the road. So let me preface this a little bit. Let me back up. When we're on the road, noon games are great. Home games, noon games early in the season are great. Certainly once you get into the meat of the season against some of the more formidable teams, I mean, night games at Beaver Stadium, obviously there's nothing like it. Last weekend against Minnesota was great. But I do think it adds a different dynamic. This will be the first time in a while that we played Ohio State, especially at home, and it hasn't been a nighttime kick. 3 of the last 4 times that we played Ohio State at home, one game went into overtime. The other game was a 1-point game. 2020, there were no fans in the stadium, so obviously that didn't have an impact.
Right.
But I'll say this: I don't necessarily know if it'll impact Penn State's chances of winning. I think the crowd's going to be into it no matter what. But I'll say this: the big noon kickoff. Anytime you've got a national broadcast, emanating from your campus, I think that's always good news, not just for the Penn State alumni, but it's good for the people tuning in. They're probably going to learn a little bit about Penn State. The people tuning in across the country that don't follow the team on a regular basis. And so, I don't know. Ask me after Saturday. Penn State wins by 2 touchdowns. I love the big noon kickoff. Penn State loses. Maybe we should have had a night game instead. So I'll play it that way.
Yeah, I think it really matters where you are, right? On the road, let's play that game at 9 o'clock in the morning because there's nothing I want more than to just get to the football game, right? During the pandemic, you could play whenever you want. I don't care, but I like the 3:30, the 5 o'clock kickoffs. Maybe I'm getting old. The 7:30, 8 o'clock kickoffs, right? You're getting home after midnight after sitting in the parking lot for an hour and a half after the game. And so, I love the atmosphere, but 3:30 seems like the ideal kick for me. But that's just the opinion of one.
Yeah, and the weather impacts it as well. We had really nice weather last week. We should have nice weather, high 50s, low 60s. That qualifies as nice in Happy Valley for late October. And so, selfishly, sometimes I look at it from my perspective. But look, the Penn State community, they want the 3:30 kick. They want the nighttime kick. They want the day of tailgating that they look forward to all year. And so I'm going to put my interest aside and say I'm going to speak up for Penn State alumni. 3:30 kick, nighttime kick. Because it's a day. It's a day long day of fun and tailgating for them, and that's what matters.
Absolutely. Well, hey, I know we have a lot of our chapter volunteers and leaders tuning in. If you are hosting game watches and gatherings and alumni events this fall, please send us your photos. We'd love to see how you're supporting the Nittany Lions throughout football season. We're going to get back on the road after this week with the Roar Tour. It's headed to Indiana, and we hope to see a lot of Penn Staters out there on the road. John, we have a chance to snowball some things, right? Because I think if we win on homecoming, we beat Ohio State, and then we go to Indiana. I bet there are people who are not planning to go to Indiana today that make that decision to make that trip over there next week and participate in the Roar Tour.
Yeah, and Bloomington's, a couple hour driving distance within some major cities in the Midwest, places where we've got alumni. And so, yeah, I think you're right. It's, you win on Saturday and suddenly, that Indiana game looks, you're probably going to have some Penn State support there either way, but certainly more with the win on Saturday, probably going to be favored in every game in November by at least a touchdown. And so, And look, it's, James Franklin and the Nittany Lions, they're always 1-0 each week, but you got to imagine they go 1-0 this week. That vibe is going to carry them throughout November. And if it does, it'll start in Bloomington, where we know we've got Penn Staters in the Midwest. And certainly that's a drivable distance for them. And certainly hope to see a lot of them out there next weekend.
Yeah, I don't want to look past Ohio State, but one of my favorite stops is that stop in Bloomington, right? We go to Nick's English Hut, one of the great Greasy Spoon restaurants in all the Big Ten. So I'm looking forward to our annual stop there.
Yeah, so speaking of kickoffs, I'm definitely rooting for a 3:30 p.m. kickoff next week in Bloomington. That noon kick, waking up at like 6 or 7 a.m. Knicks might not be happening Friday night, but our Friday night welcome event is happening right down the street. We're on the main downtown kind of stretch in Bloomington. And so, you could probably throw a baseball from where we're going to be and hit Knicks. And so we probably have some people tuning in who have been there as well. So that'll be fun. Absolutely.
And don't forget, Penn Staters, Pat Kraft's football number is not retired at Indiana, but it does hang on the wall at Nick's English Hut. And so if you're in Bloomington, you got to check out his football jersey there. He was a popular player back in his day. So, John, let's get to our guests. We have Aeneas Hawkins here tonight.
Yeah, you read my mind, Paul. So let's bring in Aeneas Hawkins. He medically retired earlier this year, so he's probably top of mind for a lot of Penn Staters. And he has been busy. Letterman defensive tackle number 27 for the Nittany Lions from 2018 to earlier this year. And I love this position, Chief Athlete Officer at Limitless NIL. I think that tells you how much they are focused on the player experience, the student athlete experience, headed by Penn State quarterback Sean Clifford, current Penn State quarterback. Aeneas, we have so much we want to get to, so let's bring you in. Aeneas, welcome to Football Letter Live. We're thrilled to have you tonight. How you doing, sir?
Fellas, doing well. Thank you guys so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Oh, it's great. Aeneas has become like a local media celebrity. So we've been excited to have you on the program and to talk to you.
Yeah, it's definitely exciting. When John reached out to me, I was jumping for joy in my little downtown apartment. So it's good to be here.
So as we mentioned, Aeneas, you're busy. You got your Penn State degree. You're building a career in media very quickly. The chief athlete officer at Limitless NIL, as we talked about. How did that transition work for you, medically retiring and then transitioning so quick where it seemed like you knew in what direction you wanted to go? Can you just kind of talk us through that transition and how you were able to do that so quickly?
Yeah. So, you're being generous when you say I knew what direction I wanted to go, right? But I had the benefit of, having family that played high level college football and in the NFL. I grew up being able to see them go through their careers, but also retire and see how they handle those certain things. So I knew immediately that I didn't want to sit around and wait. I wanted to get out and experience different things because realistically, life beyond college football, life beyond Penn State as a student really can be shocking in a lot of ways. It can be different than what you're used to. So I wanted to get some of that experience as fast as possible.
Aeneas, let's dive into a little bit with the work you're doing with Limitless. Having been a student athlete yourself, what's your perspective on name, image, and likeness in terms of how much it's changed the college athlete experience over the past couple of years?
Yeah, man. Number one, NIL is new to everybody, right? It's something that people flirted with and talked about before. Obviously has been something that's been very polarizing in the college sports community. And at Limitless NIL, something that they pride themselves on, something that I pride myself on is just really doing NIL the right way. I think there's a misconception countrywide that a lot of it is kind of selfish and just give me. So what we do at Limitless is more of a holistic development of the student athletes that we work with. We partner with Beacon Point. They're a private wealth institution that's helping our clients learn how to take care of their money. We have the peer advisor program, which helps them with their time management and developing some of the skills that they need beyond their sport. And then obviously we do some of the standard brand deals, right? And help those kids get some money in their pockets because we believe that our clients have earned the right to profit off of the brand that they've built themselves already.
Yeah, that's such a good point, Aeneas, because when you look at what student athletes are doing now in football and across the board, like they're doing what every other student is doing in college. They want to set themselves up for the next 40 years. They want to make smart decisions. They want to reach out to people in their field. And so NIL might be new to college athletics, but this is what every other student is doing in every college across the country. So I think that's a really good point.
No doubt about it. I wanted to say, it's interesting to me because, again, I come from a family of people who played professional sports. So something I grew up knowing that my dad was always echoing to me was that 78% of NFL players are going broke within 3 years of retiring, right? They had no money. They had no clue what to do with their lives beyond their sport. So to me, NIL is a good opportunity to help kids get that experience before their sport ultimately ends. So that way they can go out and find ways to be productive individuals.
So Aeneas, working with student athletes at Penn State and elsewhere, you see them taking this kind of smart, savvy approach. What are some of the things that have been standing out to you over the past year or so?
Yeah, it's interesting because when NIL first started, everybody seemed to just be jumping and grabbing any type of deals that they could get. They really weren't looking into the details. They didn't care what it was. They were just really excited to go make money. But now I'm seeing so many student athletes find ways to be creative and do things that set them up for success down the line. I'll give an example. Anna Camden, who is going to be an absolute star beyond her Penn State women's basketball career, is finding ways to develop a brand and is finding ways to give back to the community. She just put on a basketball camp. And I think that's a trend that you're seeing with a lot of student athletes across the country. And they're starting to realize the impact that they can have in the communities that they're not only going to school in, but the communities that they're from.
John, a raucous crowd here at the Hintz Family Alumni Center. We have Alumni Council in town this weekend. They are right outside my window here. I'm not sure if you heard that We Are cheer that just erupted here at the Hintz Family Alumni Center, but alumni are back ready for this big weekend against Ohio State. Aeneas, Limitless NIL, right? It's their CEO is Sean Clifford. Yeah. He's the CEO on the offense here for the Nittany Lions as well. It seems like there are probably no one in the country has taken advantage and hustled in the NIL space as much as Sean Clifford has. Give us a little bit of a look behind the scenes in terms of how he's now this is just another thing that he has to manage as a student athlete, right? He started his own business. He's trying to get it done in the classroom. He's performing on the field. Last week, Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week. How is he able to handle all of the various ways that he's being pulled?
Yeah, I think one thing that people really underestimate with Sean and maybe just don't get the chance to see is just the attitude and the effort that he puts into everything he does. I've been around a lot of high-performing people over the course of my life, especially going to a school like Penn State. And Sean is very near the top of that list in terms of what he does every day when he wakes up. Now, I will say he's developed a good team. That way, during the season, he's been able to focus on being Penn State's quarterback and being the best student athlete that he can be. But I mean, regardless, he does show up every day. He has input. He has things that he wants to add to the group. And it's been a benefit to be able to work with him.
Aeneas, you touched on this a little bit earlier about there might be a misconception with NIL, and understandably so. It's new. Maybe some people have followed it closely over the last 5 or so years, maybe not. What are one or two things that, you see working with it on a daily basis that you see, people think one thing, but this is what's actually happening? Are there maybe one or two examples that you can share?
Yeah, the first example I'll give is, oftentimes when people talk NIL and when you see the big NIL news headlines, it's these kids getting these big, giant, lucrative deals and driving these big, fancy cars and living this celebrity lifestyle, when in all reality, it's not like that for most of the student athletes here. There are plenty of sports, not just at Penn State, but countrywide, that don't have great visibility naturally. So a lot of these kids are scratching and clawing to kind of make some of these things happen. And then the next thing I'd say is, NIL is not limited to just the big scholarship athletes. I see a lot of guys and a lot of girls who really are not the most elite athletes countrywide, but they really hustle and find ways to make themselves marketable, to grow their brands and to go find success otherwise. So really, it's created a lot of opportunity for everybody.
Yeah, you think about the student athletes, like Anna Camden comes to mind, right? Sean obviously comes to mind. The things that they need to do from a social media perspective, from a personal branding perspective, are things they would be doing even if NIL wasn't in existence, right? They're outgoing, right? They're personable, they're approachable. They're the student athletes that our fans know and trend towards. So I think kind of having that predisposition to put yourself out there is certainly benefiting some of our student athletes.
100%. And I think you're on the money with that. A lot of the things that we're doing now that are getting attention and obviously now turning into profit, everybody was doing already. You know, if you're a student athlete in 2022 with all this access to social media and all this ability to go market yourself, you're already doing a lot of those things. So, you know, I know one of the arguments against NIL initially was that it distracts from what you're at school to do, which is to be a great student and to be a great ambassador and athlete for the university. But realistically, these things have been going on since the early 90s and 2000s with the boom of the internet. And now kids are finally able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I had the chance to have breakfast with one of our women's soccer players this morning, and she was talking to me about how it's really benefited her, right? Look, I think Penn State's got a competitive advantage over a lot of institutions because our football players are going to get NIL deals, but here, wrestlers are going to get them, soccer players, volleyball players, right? There is a following that Penn State has for a lot of our sports that a lot of other institutions don't enjoy. But she was talking about how, the couple $100 here and there, how that's kind of just made the difference for her in a number of different ways in being a student athlete here at Penn State.
Yeah, not to oversimplify it or anything, but at the end of the day, the people that, a lot of the fans and the alumni are able to watch play their sport, they're just broke college kids like the rest of them 99% of the time. So I think it's hard to keep that in the framework because of how often you see them on the TV doing what they love. A lot of them do not come for money and do not have a bunch of money. So again, like you said, it creates a lot of opportunity for those athletes.
So Aeneas, we've talked with Pat Kraft, AD here at Penn State, and he's talked about NIL is here to stay. Whatever you think about it, it's not going anywhere. This is not just a fad or a trend. And he's talked about the importance of Penn State being a leader in this because it is here to stay. I know it's early. There are a couple of different groups. I'm just wondering, what's the potential for Penn State to position itself as a leader in this field, knowing that for the next decade, it's probably going to have a big impact on recruiting.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, right? Because I remember when I was a recruit back in the day, one of the big selling points that Coach Franklin gave me was just the alumni network and the value that's there. Obviously, Penn State is a school that's excelled athletically for a long time, and they'll continue to do such. But really, as far as a ceiling for NIL at Penn State, I really don't think there is one because of how strong and powerful that alumni network is. So once we can all get beyond the point of arguing about NIL and whether or not it deserves to be there and understand that it is here and it's not going anywhere, and the alum really pour into it and buy into it, I think the ceiling is as high as anywhere else in the country.
Now, Aeneas, John mentioned earlier that you are a journalism grad, and you are really kind of stepping out to start your career. Talk a little bit about what you're doing, right? Penn State are see and hear from you on a regular basis with your appearances on TV and radio. What's been your approach to kind of finding your voice in this space, and how did your time as a student athlete kind of shape your perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a loaded question. I would say, initially just growing up, I keep going back to my family, but my uncle and dad both, when they retired from the NFL, immediately got into broadcasting. So that kind of laid the blueprint for me immediately. And then my time here as a Penn State athlete just kind of confirmed those things. I was blessed to have an academic advisor like Todd Kolka, who opened up opportunity for me to talk to other broadcasters who were established and had been in the industry for a long time. And that experience is really what propelled me to take a deep dive and go for it right when football ended. So, nowadays I'm doing some shows for the local ESPN affiliate here. I'm doing one with Chris Buganacci and Goon, Keith Conlon over there. So staying busy and really just trying to get the repetitions to kind of hone in on my craft.
Yeah, I saw Aeneas outside Beaver Stadium a few weeks ago before a game, and it was sort of like, where is Aeneas Hawkins not right now? And you've got like sort of this a little bit like legacy. So you've got Michael Robinson, of course, on NFL Network. I know Jason Kabinda has talked about wanting to get into broadcasting. We've got Aeneas here. So that's really great to see. And Aeneas, you talked about recruiting. James Franklin, your freshman season was 2018, not that far ago. Yeah. During the recruiting process, as you were looking at colleges and hearing from coaches, what about Penn State stood out to you about the institution and especially the messages that the coaches were telling you about this place?
Yeah, the biggest thing was, the alumni network was really big. They talked about family atmosphere, not just in the football building, but with Penn State as a whole. I visited a lot of places. I visited a lot of really good football programs as a recruit. I didn't feel at home anywhere like I felt like I was at home as I did with Penn State. So, I really, that was the biggest selling point for me. I have family in Pennsylvania, and from the time they offered me, there was really no question in their mind as to where I was going. And now that I'm retired, actually, I finally am getting to feel the full effect of this Penn State family. And I can confidently say that Coach Franklin didn't tell me any lies when I was 16 to 17 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. Aeneas, I see you're from Cincinnati.
Yep.
Does your relationship with Sean go back to your days in Cincinnati, or did you? How long have you known Sean, and were you rivals in high school?
Yeah, so Sean Clifford and I've told people this before, we did not get along in high school. He played for the rival school. We played in the GCL, which is a super duper competitive environment. So the first time we met, actually, we played my junior year. We had Coach Franklin, I want to say Urban Meyer and Dabo Sweeney at that game watching. And I was trying to take Sean's head off. That was before we were friends, but it obviously led into a friendship. We ended up working out at the same gym in the back halves of our athletic career in high school. And then that really propelled us in college. And that's how we got to where we are today.
Yeah, I think one of the first times that I remember hearing from you and hearing from your story was at the State College Quarterback Club. And there's the many dimensions of Aeneas Hawkins, right? There's the defensive tackle who wants to take your head off, right? But there's also the guy who could sit down and play the piano, the guy who wants to engage in a game of chess, right?
No doubt.
Or boxing, right? You have many different layers to the Aeneas Hawkins onion. To talk a little bit about your various interests and, help us make sense of a guy who could be a savage on the field and then sit down and enjoy kind of the cerebral nature of a game of chess.
Yeah, so believe it or not, my dad did not want me to play football as a child. He had no interest in me doing it. I was homeschooled, so my mother, bless her heart, she put me in as many activities as she could just to kind of see where I fit in. And that's how things like chess, piano, boxing kind of came about. And now as a man, I'm thankful for it, right? Because now that football is done, I don't ever have the feeling that I don't know what to do next, or that I'm not equipped to go do other things. So really, it's just a testament to my parents and their messages as I was growing up in their house. As a kid, obviously, you don't want to hear any of it. I always, in my heart, knew I wanted to play football. There was no question. I wasn't watching cartoons. I was watching ESPN Top 10 from the time I learned how to walk. Right. But now, again, it gives me some leverage and some opportunity that I wouldn't have had before.
Aeneas, a few weeks ago, Paul and I were talking with Adam Brenneman, and he was talking about even though he couldn't, even though his playing days were behind him, it meant so much to him to still be connected to the sport and really be connected to the people. And of course, I'm sure he's out calling games across the country. What does it mean to you to still be as closely connected to Penn State, to State College, to the people of this community in everything that you're doing?
It means a lot to me. I dealt with injuries the entirety of my career, especially in college. And really the biggest holdup in me choosing to retire from football was just the thought of not having access to that, right? Like my whole life, my identity had been wrapped up in that. The relationships I built at Penn State specifically, it was just a lot to think about letting go prematurely. So now that I get to be around it still, I get all the fun of football. I get to talk about it. I still see my former teammates. I was on the sideline for the whiteout last week, and PJ Musfer ran up and gave me a bear hug, man. And it's cool because you get to still experience all the fun parts of it. But I get to also experience life outside of football finally. So it's been a great opportunity.
That's great. Aeneas, I want to give you a chance to plug some of the work you're doing. If people want to listen to podcasts that you're on or watch you on TV, where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me. I see it scrolling at the bottom of the screen here. Aeneas Hawkins on Twitter. I'll be posting any podcasts and shows that I do there from here on. And then I don't know if we have any TikTokers in the crowd. I know that's a little bit newer, but you can find me at Aeneas Hawkins there as well. I kind of do a more unfiltered, say it how it is type of experience there about football. So follow me there too.
Aeneas, thanks for coming on Football Letter Live. We appreciate you, and we look forward to watching your career flourish.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate you guys.
Yep. Thanks, Aeneas.
Yep.
Another great kind of success with honor story. The day that he was at the State College Quarterback Club, you had to see the look on people's face when he was talking about on chess, talking about playing chess, and that's what he does to relax. It's not something that you hear normally from some of our student athletes.
Yeah, and we've talked about this before, when John Ursher was on the show and a few other Nittany Lions, and kind of like the interest that they have. And I thought Aeneas made such a great point about, you see them on the field, you see them in the helmets and the shoulder pads. Like, look, these are college kids. Some of them were just in their high school prom a few months ago, and so it's the NIL can help them. I think having somebody like Aeneas who has a great personality, has a great perspective, because he was just in their shoes a year or two ago. I think that's helpful. I think when you have a player-led initiative like Limitless, I think that brings a perspective that you're just not going to find anywhere else. And so we seem to say this after every Letterman interview. We want to have him back on the show. And so, but yeah, absolutely appreciate Aeneas coming on and wishing him all the best.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought up John Urshel's name, because it seems like those two guys might be cut from the same cloth. Really, really impressive. Well, talking about impressive guys, right? In the wings, we have waiting Terrence Casey and Jeff Mosier, and our wonderful producer Vincent Longaro. Let's have them come on and talk a little bit about the Collegian AIG. Excellent. How are you guys doing tonight?
All right. Good evening.
All right. Terrence Casey, class of 2009. He's the Collegian AIG vice president. Jeff Mosier is the 1998 graduate. He's a member of the AIG and a mentor for a couple of the Collegian students. Let's start right at the very beginning, Jeff, with you. How did you become a Nittany Lion, and what made this the school for you?
Well, I like to joke with my friends. I grew up in Connecticut, first New York, then Connecticut. And when I was looking at schools, I had Penn State was not first on my list. But when I realized it was 6 hours from where I lived, I was like, yes, that's where I want to go. Really far away from where I've been. Actually had my best friend, was into engineering. He came to Penn State, took a visit, came back, and he said, Jeff, I think you'd really like Penn State. So I said, all right, I'll take a visit. And then I came up to the campus and I fell in love with it. Wound up doing also a journalism workshop, a multicultural journalism workshop my senior year in high school. And then before going to Penn State. So I got a second chance to really come to the campus and walk around and get immersed in the culture. And I was sold from the start, like a lot of people who go to Penn State. You just get up there and you fall in love with the atmosphere, the environment, the culture, and you just say, hey, this is the place for me. That's how I felt.
Jeff, where in Connecticut are you from?
Oh, boy. I lived in Fairfield, Norwalk, and Shelton. So kind of that southwestern Connecticut area, sort of New York suburb-ish.
Yeah, absolutely. We lived in Manchester for 4 years.
Oh, yeah, up there.
And I worked at UConn for those 4 years while we were there. Terrence, what's your origin story? How'd you become a Nittany Lion?
Well, similarly to Jeff, Penn State wasn't even on my list. I was in the midst of a tour of some small, safe-feeling private colleges in the eastern part of the state, and was suggested by my parents actually that I take a look out at this behemoth of a college out in the middle of nowhere. But just like Jeff said, when we got there and just seeing sort of how alive the whole campus was, and getting a chance to walk in and out of the different academic buildings, and took a lunch break out on the old main lawn, and it's like something out of a movie, getting pulled into a frisbee catch with total strangers. I didn't even start on a tour or anything before I came back, met up with my mom, and said, this really feels like college to me.
Absolutely. Vincent, our audience knows you very well from your many appearances over the last 2 years, but what they might not know is how you became a Nittany Lion.
Yeah, it's a fun story. I'm from Michigan originally, so I was surrounded by Michigan State and Michigan fans. My dad was always a Penn State football fan, though, going back to the 80s with Joe Paterno. So I was always a Penn State football fan, too. This was my dream school. Came out for a visit in 2011, I believe. Went to a football game against Illinois. It was a terrible game. We lost. But just the whole experience, getting to tour the campus, the journalism school here, I knew as soon as I got my acceptance letter, this is where I wanted to go. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that.
All right, I'm going to get people in trouble now here. What inspired you to write for the Collegian versus Onward State? Terrence, I'm going to let you weigh in on that debate there.
Well, Jeff and I have the easy answer for that one, which is Onward State didn't exist when we were there. And truthfully, it was dumb luck that got me into the Collegian, which really changed my personal and professional life. And it was just a couple of classmates from the very first class that I took, two friends that are still very dear to me, one sitting to my left and one sitting behind me, said, we're going to try out for the Collegian. I'm there. What is the Collegian? Looked it up, but I had worked for the high school paper and thought, all right, well, this is probably about the same thing. And I couldn't have been more wrong. But once I got down to the office and kind of saw the space, I was addicted and wanted to really be a part of it. And that just grew semester after semester for the next 4 years.
Jeff, how about you? What inspired you to write?
Yeah, so it's a similar story in that Onward State was not, the internet was barely a thing when I got to Penn State, and that makes me feel really old. Back then we had to actually go to like certain places where they had computer labs just to access the internet. So when I went to Penn State, I knew I wanted to be in sports journalism of some type. I just wasn't sure where. My friends would always make fun of me because I just didn't shut up about sports. I mean, I was obsessed with sports. In fact, I can even remember a time where most human beings who like sports want to get, autographs from athletes. And there was a day where Mike and the Mad Dog, the legendary, WFAN crew out of New York City, were doing some appearance there. And I wanted to go there and get their autographs. And all they did was talk about sports. So when I got to Penn State, this is the mid-90s, kind of the height of Sports Center. And I figured maybe I could be that kind of guy, a Sports Center anchor, the next Olbermann or Dan Patrick or what have you. But you really don't get into broadcast journalism classes like most students don't get into their core classes of their major until junior or senior year. So I felt that if I started writing at the Collegian, that was a good way to just kind of be in the sports journalism industry or the realm before I could get into the broadcasting. But lo and behold, I found that I had a love for writing, sports writing especially, that I didn't even know that I had until I started doing it. Covering events was great. And I dedicated my life to the Daily Collegian. I remember in mid-90s, 94, when I get there is not even a center for sports journalism. There's just the College of Com. So the Collegian really was our quote-unquote center for sports journalism. And that for me, it was like an immediate addiction. And I spent way too many hours at the Collegian, but it was all worth it.
How about you, Vince? When you came to Penn State, did you know that you wanted to write for the Collegian, and you were right there in the middle of the heyday of the Collegian Onward State rivalry?
Oh yeah, It was like Chiefs Raiders. It was up there with Yankees Red Sox. It was some fun and intense rivalry time. My dream when I was younger was to be quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. Getting into high school and realizing I had very limited athletic ability, that quickly changed. When I was in high school, I kind of knew I wanted to pursue sports journalism in some capacity. When I got to school, I actually did approach the Onward State booth at the career fair, but they were very rude. They weren't very approachable. So instead, I went and checked out the Collegian at my mom's suggestion, went through the candidate class and was fortunate enough to get in there. It was a great experience. And, obviously the highlight of my time in college was with the Collegian.
Well, there we go. Shots fired, rude and unapproachable.
I had to get one in.
Vincent Longaro, his assessment of Onward State. You guys must have some great stories from your time covering Penn State football. Vincent, let's stay with you. I've heard a couple of these, and they're great. But what are some of your favorite moments from covering Penn State football for the Collegian?
I think, I don't know if there's one in particular, but I think just the overall work we did covering because I was fortunate enough to cover the team in 2016, the Big Ten championship, the Rose Bowl team. I just think the quality of the coverage that we did was just exceptional. And, getting to go to Indianapolis for that in the Rose Bowl, obviously in Pasadena, it was so much fun. And it's just memories that I wouldn't trade for anything. I got to shout out the people that I worked with who are just doing incredible things in journalism now. Weiss Aramesh works for Rolling Stone. Garrett Ross works for Politico. Matt Martell is the baseball editor for Sports Illustrated. All those guys were on, covering the team. Gianna Hahn, who covers the Flyers, I believe, for the Philadelphia Inquirer now. So just being able to spend time with them and road trips and stuff like that was just a ton of great memories.
It's a really authentic answer, but it's also a really Penn State answer, right? You are on the show every week and you hear the former student athletes, the lettermen that we have on here. And rarely do they ever talk about a favorite moment on the field, right? But it's the relationships that they've built with others. Terrence, how about for you, some of your memories from covering Penn State football with the Collegian?
Yeah, so I actually I did cover the team for a couple of years, but in my professional life, in my post-collegian life, when I came up through the Collegian ranks, I was strictly on the campus and metro portions of the paper until my time as editor-in-chief. So the closest I came during my time as Collegian was actually selecting the football staff and making the decisions like how many people are we sending to the different away games and such. And boy, to this day, those are some of the hardest management decisions that I've ever had to make in my life, and I still question whether some of them were the right ones. But in covering the team, which I did for statecollege.com after graduation, I think the most jarring moment for me was the first time being down on the field in the last 5 minutes of the game. Just how deafening it is, and you hear about that constantly, but to the point of medical injury, just how loud it can get down there, and then also how enormous these guys can be. And I was shooting video on a little flip camera because that was the trend at the time, from the back of the end zone, and got absolutely rocked by Jared Odrick, who at that time I think was the largest human being I had seen in my life. So that I don't have the scars to prove it, but I do have the video still.
Jeff, how about for you?
Yeah, I think Vince probably summarized it the same way, in that when you cover the football team for the Collegian or wherever you cover it for, a lot of times when you're in college and you're doing it, it becomes less about the moment on the field and more about getting into a car. We used to have a Collegian car, a Subaru, right, with two other writers and a photographer, and driving out to Bloomington or driving out to Madison, driving out to Iowa, and just the great camaraderie, the stories. You get to know people from who you work with, but really, obviously you're with them in a car for 8 to 10 hours and delirium sets in. So you get great stories. I think that was the most fun part of it, along with the games. And I was fortunate when I started covering the team, my freshman year was 94. They were undefeated, didn't win the national championship because there's no, national championship game. But 96 and 97 is when I covered the team. And they fluctuated between 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. So they were a very good team. And what'll always stand out to me is my opportunity to cover the 1997 Fiesta Bowl in Tempe, Arizona. I had never been out west like that before. So, just stepping off the plane and being in the desert was just a tremendous experience. And then if you remember, they used to play in the old Sun Devil Stadium, which was like built into a mountain. And then they put the college media literally at the top, not in the press box, at the top of the stadium, the auxiliary press box, and sort of overlooking all the mountains and the desert. You almost have to pinch yourself. Like, I can't believe I'm really here. A lot of people who are, titans of college sports writing are there as well, watching the game in front of me, even though everybody looked like little ants at that point. But it was just a great experience that, not any college student could have had. So I felt very fortunate.
Sure. Sun Devil Stadium, one of the more scenic venues
Definitely.
in all of college sports, a wonderful backdrop there. People still climb up there to watch whatever they could see from up there. I don't know that they could actually see any of the game, but again, a wonderful, wonderful college atmosphere there. Let's transition to now you being graduates of Penn State and being involved with the Collegian AIG. Terrence, what's kind of motivated you to stay connected to Penn State in that way?
Yeah. So I only just started as the AIG vice president this year, but this is actually my third term with the AIG. It's a cause that is of particular importance to me. Even though I'm no longer in journalism, I'm in communications. I still really support local media and particularly student media, and most particularly independent student media. So I really want to see the Collegian not only survive, but thrive and continue to adapt and redefine the industry that I really came into and love. And just by connecting with my old friends and everyone a year above and below them, and if we can all do that, then that is a tremendous network. And what is the Penn State Alumni Association if not the network? I think we can find that same support for the current students and for early career professionals and lifelong journalists and everyone who has survived the industry, as we'll say.
Jeff, how about for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I got to the Collegian, Paul, I mean, for one of the first things I realized was how many people had come before me who were really, established in the industry. Tom Verducci, who's a great, maybe the best baseball writer in the country, and he would come back to Penn State to talk to especially the sports writers. We love that. Dana O'Neill, who was working for the Philadelphia Daily News at the time I was at the Collegian. Now she's one of the top college basketball writers in the country. I think she works for The Athletic. Ira Miller at the time, believe he covered San Francisco sports out in the Bay Area. I'm probably forgetting some names of people that, I remember seeing, wow, they went to Penn State. Ryan Jones, of course, a good friend of mine who's up there at Penn State as well right now. So when I saw that pipeline and the fact that they came back to Penn State, they helped us as daily Collegian students to acclimate into the industry. And then I happened to go to college at the same time with Ryan Jones, who wrote the first book about LeBron James, and Mike Weinreb, who's an author, and he covered the Cleveland Indians for the Akron Beacon Journal, and Jordan Hyman, who has been in the media industry as well, wrote a great story about The Rock once when he worked for the Eastern Express Times. Don't know if people realize The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, grew up for a little while in the Lehigh Valley. So then you see us, we get out there and establish ourselves in the media world, and we see how hard it is now, even now, more than when I came out of the Collegian, to get jobs, to understand the industry, to advance. So it's important for me as a Collegian alumni to help Collegian students especially, help figure out what they want to do, give them opportunities to work at my company, Inside the Birds, let them see all of what the industry is like now as they try to figure out what they want to do, and then help establish connections there.
And you, Vince, not only being involved with the AIG, but now you do this professionally, helping keep Penn Staters connected to the university through the Alumni Association.
I can't say I'm involved with the AIG. Obviously, I think that needs to change soon. It seems like they do a lot of great work. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll give you a call, Terrence. But yeah, I mean, you can't say enough about the job that they do in making sure that future generations of Collegian students they have what they need to succeed. So I think that's obviously really important. And yeah, just working at the Alumni Association, in my role doing social media, I just hope to bring Penn State a little bit closer to whoever I can reach on social media. One day on TikTok, maybe, I don't know, we'll get Aeneas for that. But yeah, it's, and as someone who came from a high school that was only 200 people to, my first class at Penn State was over 300 in a seminar, I'm always going to be on the lookout to help, students any way I can in that regard.
Absolutely. Well, we know what Vince is doing professionally now. Jeff, bring us up to date. What are you doing professionally? How can people support the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, I started up a podcast and a company with my business partner. His name's Adam Kaplan. He is not a Penn State alum. He's a Temple guy, but he's an NFL insider who used to work at ESPN. We both are Eagles insiders from our profession. We started up a podcast 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago now, 2018. Did well when we started off, and so we kept doing it. And then from that, we sort of built the Inside the Birds podcast into a company. It's Inside the Birds. We have a YouTube channel. We have a post-game Eagles show. We have a pre-game Eagles show. We have InsideTheBirds.com that we write for. We have a Patreon channel, InsideTheBirds.com/Patreon, and we just keep adding arms and layers to our Inside the Birds company.
Now, come on, full disclosure. Did you grow up a Philadelphia Eagles fan? Because you were right in the heart of like New York Giants.
I didn't.
/ Patriots.
I didn't, but I think that's, to Terrence's point about independent journalism, right? And the importance of it. I did not grow up an Eagles fan, and I think that makes people like me good to cover the team because we don't wave pom-poms. We're strictly about X's and O's analysis, objective coverage of the team. And to be honest with you, in this day and age, I think people are starting to appreciate that. A lot of the feedback that we get is that people appreciate the balance that we take to the job because a lot of our industry has been overcome with shows of people just screaming at each other and yelling. And we don't do that. We just talk football, X's and O's analysis. And I think people are sort of enjoying that counterculture of journalism again.
Yeah, well, as a Philadelphia Eagles fan, I appreciate the work that you're doing. Is it easier to cover, or let me say this, are the ratings better when the team's winning or losing?
It's funny. The ratings are great when the team is winning, like now. The ratings are pretty good, the views, the clicks, when they're losing badly, because everybody, in this diehard area wants to know exactly how this team's going to get better. It's when they're 8-8 that's not so good. We don't want that, right? But no, we always want the team to do well because our numbers are really at its best when the Eagles are like now 6-0.
Absolutely. Well, as an Eagles fan, I'm certainly, a lifetime Eagles fan. I'm measured, right? I'm not going to get too excited because I've seen this movie before and have been disappointed with the ending. Terrence,
you sound like an Eagles fan, no doubt.
Oh yeah, there's a misery that I carry with me.
Fair enough.
Terrence, how about you? What are you doing professionally now?
So after my collegian days, I hopped around in a couple of local journalism outfits, the startup StateCollege.com when it was a startup, and then a politics and business magazine for a short while too. And but about 7 years ago, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and I've been managing communications there for the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center there. It's called the Penn Memory Center. So I manage all of our communications and public outreach, research recruitment strategies, and the like. Far cry from covering Penn State football.
Yeah, but certainly work worth doing, and we appreciate all that you're doing there in your career. If somebody wants to get involved with the Collegian AIG, how do they find out more about the interest group?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go to psucollegianalumni.com. I see it at the bottom of the screen there. You could, if you just search for the Collegian AIG, you'll find it as well. You can also feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm pretty easy to find, particularly on Twitter and LinkedIn.
All right, let's end with one fun question here. You're covering the Penn State football beat. What would your story be coming into this week's game against Ohio State? Jeff, let's start with you.
Oh man, I was always into writing. There were like 4 of us on the beat, so I always tried to take the off the beat type story, or not necessarily the obvious, big showdown. So I probably would want to, if I was permitted access, to talk to Drew Aller just about being from Ohio and coming to a school like Penn State. When I was at the Collegian, we had a bunch of really good players. Curtis Aeneas, for example, who was from Ohio. And it was at a time where Penn State was really good at getting recruits from some real strongholds in Ohio that used to be Ohio State territory. And we had a really awesome magazine story about that, kind of how Penn State was stealing recruits from Ohio. But I would just kind of get into the mindset there of Drew, and what's it like back home for him that he goes to a rival school like that. And I always like those kind of off the beat, under the radar type stories.
Terrence, how about you?
I'm also going to live Jeff's fantasy of open access to the football team, which was not what I experienced 12 years ago. But in a perfect world, I would want to be with one of the recruits the first time they're hearing the crowd all there together. I mean, I think of what that moment was for me in the last 5 minutes of a meaningless game where no one knew who I was. But some of these recruits who are coming out, and at least hundreds of people know who that person is specifically right there and are cheering for a high school athlete, and 110,000 people just breaking eardrums for the biggest game of the year. I just to witness someone else take all that in one moment and be able to tell that story. That'd be the direction I would want to go.
Vince, how about for you?
I definitely wouldn't want to do the game preview because that was always the most basic story you could do. I would probably do something on just kind of the paths of Joey Porter Jr. and Marvin Harrison Jr., which is unbelievable to even say right now that their sons are playing in the NFL. But I would love to get access through the Ohio State channels of Marvin Harrison Jr. and just kind of, his growth and his path. Obviously his dad plays the same position he's playing now. Joey Porter, it's a little bit different. But yeah, just getting, both of their stories and their backgrounds to this moment. They're probably going to be going one-on-one quite a bit this weekend. So yeah, something in detail on them and just kind of their almost, path laid out for them to stardom.
Well, those are 3 stories that I would like to read. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on Football Letter Live. We greatly appreciate you helping out the show, but we more appreciate you being volunteers for the Penn State Alumni Association. So thanks for all you do.
You got it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, let's get John Petishnock back in here. Vincent, you hang out for just a couple minutes or leave. That's fine too. There you go. I'm not sure if you caught the women's volleyball game last night on the Big Ten Network, Vincent, but a disappointing setback for sure.
Yeah, it was a tough one. Illinois, who we defeated earlier in the season. I'm blanking on the name of the player who is out for the season. She went down in an injury this past weekend for Penn State. I know she plays middle, I believe. My mom's going to text me right after the show is done to let me know. But her being out for the season, I think, is a big blow. But they have a great chance to rebound this weekend against Ohio State in their Dig Pink game at Rec Hall. So I'm sure that atmosphere will be rocking and expect a great environment over there.
Yeah, last regular season game for women's field hockey as they head over to Rutgers. Certainly looking to be one of the top seeds in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, they are, and I think a share of the Big Ten title, as Bonnie shares with us here, is up for grabs. They've had a terrific season, and obviously one more game away from earning at least a share of the Big Ten title. It's always special. So good luck to them.
A little bit of an unusual situation for the women's soccer team, the 6th seed in the upcoming Big Ten tournament. They head to Wisconsin tomorrow for a weekend matchup with the Badgers as the underdog.
Yeah, kind of an unfamiliar position for them, but it seems like every time the Big Ten tournament rolls around, it seems like they're always playing really well. So, I'm confident that they're going to make a good showing of themselves out there. But yeah, probably not the season they've expected, but I still think they'll give a good showing of themselves out there.
Yeah, men's and women's basketball practice has tipped off already. Wrestling practice is well underway. They'll be getting into their seasons a little bit down the road in early November. I've seen Micah Shrewsbury, ever the promoter of men's basketball, taking the team over to East Halls for a meet and greet with some of our first year students over there.
Yeah, I mean, similar to Pat Chambers and his time here at Penn State, Micah Shrewsbury does a great job of promoting the basketball program. And I think that's really important for whoever is the head coach at Penn State for basketball. Obviously doesn't have the same fan support that football does typically, but he does a great job of, going to the students. I mean, Shrew Slam a Gem, I think is what it's called. And so it's always a fun time to see that. If nothing else, they should be exciting this year, highest ranked recruiting class of all time. So looking forward to what they do, what they can do this year. And Taylor Trammell is the name of the volleyball player who unfortunately got injured this past weekend and was a big loss for them. So there you go.
There you go. Thanks, Mom. Shout out.
That was actually my sister. So
okay. That is funny. Vince, what will we be reading on the blog this week?
Yeah, we'll have a great preview from John previewing the Ohio State game and kind of an in-depth look at kind of what folks can expect there. The game day email, as always, coming your way as well. Some great photos that Steve Manuel got from the Minnesota game will be a part of that, I'm sure. John got a ton of great video as well from that game and homecoming weekend as a whole. So be on the lookout for that, of course, this weekend.
Absolutely. Well, Vince, thanks for all you're doing for the Alumni Association, and thanks for taking us around campus on Football Letter Live.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, John Petishnock, if there's ever a week I wanted to go 1-0, it's this week.
Yeah, I was going to tell a story, but we're like up against the clock. So yes, Go State beat the Buckeyes. Huge game at Beaver Stadium Saturday at noon. The kickoff could be whatever. I think that place is going to be packed. Well before kickoff, we're going to have the pregame performance with the band, cheerleaders, Nittany Lion. The S Zone will be rocking. And then look, hey, after the win, Penn Staters can stick around Happy Valley and tailgate all day.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thank you for joining us and for tuning in to Football Letter Live. We appreciate all you do for the university, for the glory, and for the future. We are
Penn State.